ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। Om Sai Ram, Om Sai Ram, my dear brothers and sisters of Sai Ram family. Now I am starting my 13th video on Sai Gita, the holy book, the Brahma Gyan and Atam Gyan of our beloved Satya Sai Baba. Here it goes. Samadhi is equal mindedness. The experience of that bliss has been referred to as the state of Samadhi. What is the meaning of Samadhi? Samadhi is ordinarily mistaken to be an emotional state in which a person acts abnormally, as if in a state of high excitement or trance. You may think that samadhi is something different from the waking, dream, or deep sleep states, but truly, samadhi is something common to all three states. The meaning of samadhi is inherent in the word itself. Its root syllables sama or equal and dhi or mind together mean equal mindedness. To be equal minded in cold or in heat, in profit or in loss, in praise or in censure. That is samadhi. Therefore, a person who is immersed in samadhi, whose mind is in equanimity, will always be in a state of bliss, whether he is in the waking state immersed in his everyday life or whether he is in the dream state or in the deep sleep state. Everyone yearns for such a beatific state. To attain it, a great deal of spiritual practice is necessary. You also have to earn the grace of the Lord by living a life replete with the virtuous qualities that are pleasing to Him. After describing the noble characteristics of truly wise men, Krishna told Arjuna, Arjuna, there is no value whatsoever in your basing your actions only on considerations involving the body. Follow my commands, discharge your duties while all the time thinking of me, then you will be able to experience and enjoy the divinity that is everywhere. This divinity is the unity which underlies all the diversity in the world. Base your actions on that. Constantly concentrate on that divinity. I am that divinity and you are very dear to me. When you concentrate on me, then I will be fully concentrated on you. For a wise man, whatever be the state he is in, his thoughts and feelings will not undergo any change. He will have developed an unwavering attitude, being focused at all times on the divine principle within. Who will be surprised to hear that fire is accompanied by heat? Burning is the natural state of fire, just as cold is the natural state of ice. So also everyone who is born will die. This should be considered as totally natural. Anyone who recognizes this truth will not be subjected to sorrow in all places and in all circumstances. Develop an equal mindedness. Whatever happens, always keep your mind firmly fixed on the divinity, which is your true self. In order to develop this ability to think of the Atma, your divine nature in all places and at all times, you will have to gain a deep understanding of the characteristics of the three worlds, the physical, the mental, and the causal. In the evening, you take your food and shortly afterwards you go to bed. Soon after that you are asleep and get a number of dreams. Many things happen to you in your dreams, but after getting up, nothing remains of the dream state. In the waking state, you engage in many different activities and have numerous experiences. But then later on, when you go back to sleep again, all these activities of the waking state are superseded by the events in the dream state. We see that so many changes come about in just 24 hours. You are alone, or you alone are true. There are a number of striking differences in your experiences of the dream state and those of the waking state. Considering this, what should you believe and what should you not believe? You may ask which is true, which is not true. Am I the one who experiences all these various happenings in the waking state, or am I the one who experiences all those other happenings in the dream state? The wisdom teachings give the answer. You are neither this nor that. You are not the one experiencing this waking state, nor are you the one experiencing the dream state, nor are you the one asleep in the deep sleep state. You are transcend all these. You transcend all these. You are the transcendental reality itself. That which you think exists really does not exist. That which you do not believe exists really exists. When you acquire wisdom, you realize that there is only the one which really exists and is eternally true. That is the Atma, the transcendental principle. But this principle of Atma is not easily accessible to ordinary people. All that you read, listen to, and experience are merely attributes of the physical state. Starting with this, you have to reach out and try to achieve your goal. From the form, you have to progress to the formless. From the changeable, you have to progress to the changeless. From the attributeful, you have to progress to the attributeless. Beyond all these, transcending all attributes and going even beyond the attributeless and formless is the unchanging and unwavering superconscious state. This is the goal of all spiritual aspirants. One who has become immersed in this state is described as a wise sage. You may wonder if Arjuna achieved this state. Yes, Krishna himself conferred this state on Arjuna. Krishna transformed Arjuna into an instrument of the divine and thereby turned him into a truly wise being. If a wise man does not engage in activities, he will not be able to set a good example to the common people. In schools, you will find a director of physical education and a drill master. The drill master takes his order from the director. During the calisthenics drill, the director will keep quiet, but the drill master will call all 1, 2, 3 and perform all the drill movements. He has to set the example. Only then can the others be expected to follow him. Similarly, the wise man, while taking his orders from the inner director, sets an example so ordinary people will be able to follow. When Krishna gave Arjuna the Gita, he transformed him into an ideal man. Krishna told him, I will turn you into my instrument to do my work so that you will be an example to all humanity. What is the deeper meaning of Krishna doing all this for Arjuna? Arjuna means the one with a pure heart. Arjuna was always living in Krishna. A number of times Krishna referred to Arjuna as the one who lives in the effulgence of God. All the deeper aspect of the relationship of Krishna and Arjuna can be gleaned from the names that Krishna gave to Arjuna. Arjuna's only duty was to implicitly follow Krishna's commands. The qualities of the true truly wise. Arjuna said, Swami, I will obey your commands, whatever they may be. Whatever you ask of me, I will do. I will not undertake anything on my own, anything that is outside of your directions. This is true attitude of a sage. He will not have the feeling of I and mine. He will not have any egoism and attachments. His every action will destroy any trace of ego or possessiveness. He will accept and follow only the commands of the Lord, in no different than he is, who is no different than his own inner director, because these noble qualities are so important for spiritual unfoldment. The characteristics of a wise man are explained at great length in the second chapter of the Gita. But just describe the qualities of a wise sage would not have been of much use, so Krishna began by explaining the qualities of the three states and the different aspects of the three worlds. Arjuna had the intellectual capacity to grasp the true significance of this. After being given the vision of the cosmic form of the Lord, he immediately understood its deeper meaning. He realized that it meant the union between the physical, the mental, and the causal. After having had the vision of the cosmic form, whenever Arjuna closed his eyes thereafter, he would continuously see Krishna as an indelible impression on his heart. He realized that what he had seen with his eyes wide open was in the physical plane. Then, after closing his eyes, whatever still registered in his mind and was being seen by him internally was in the mental plane. The indelible impression of this vision that remained in his heart was in the causal plane. It is something like print on paper. Once a picture is printed, it is impossible to separate it again from the paper. In this way, the cosmic form of Krishna became a permanent impression in the Arjuna's heart. Arjuna was the ideal man. Yet, in order to serve as an example for all of humanity, he undertook all kinds of common activities just like an ordinary person. Inside, within himself, he always kept his mind firmly fixed on Lord Krishna, who was the formful expression of his own true self, the Atma. Arjuna knew that this physical body was for the sole purpose of obeying the commands of the inner director manifested for him in the divine form of Krishna. In the Gita, Krishna held out this quality of inner surrender as the ideal mark of a truly wise man. Limit desires, be ever content, and you will be dear to God. Whatever is born passes through six stages of life, namely birth, growth, maturity, decline, degeneration, and death. But what is never born never dies, for it these stages do not apply. Embodiments of law. The second chapter of the Gita relates to the path of wisdom. The principle that underlies the wisdom teachings is that whatever is born must die, but what was never born can never die. What is never born and will never die? The Atma. Atma has neither birth nor death. It never undergoes any kind of modifications. Atma is permanent, it is immutable, it is everlasting, it is attributeless, it is your own true nature. The body is born and the body experiences the various phases of life and dies. But the indweller of the body remains unaffected by all these bodily changes. This indweller is the Atma. It is free of illusion, devoid of Maya. Once you understand this divine principle, you will recognize it as the only thing of true value, the only thing worth knowing. Everything else is ephemeral and impermanent. You must make every effort to acquire the knowledge of Atma and thereby gain lasting joy. Be satisfied, do not chase after desires. Do not encourage the multiplication of desires. Be satisfied with whatever you have been given. In the chapter on devotion, Krishna enumerated the 26 noble qualities which endear a devotee to the Lord. Of these, contentment stands out as one of the most important characteristics of a devotee. It means not running after worldly enjoyments. You have enjoyed so many luxuries and so many sensual things in your life, but you have not gained peace and fulfillment from them. Give up chasing after them and you will gain contentment. The heart of a person who does not have contentment is like a bamboo past riddled with holes. If you try to draw water out of a well using such a basket, by the time it comes up, all the water will have leaked out. There will not even be a drop of water left to quench your thirst. Similarly, when you are suffering from pangs of desire and greed, all your contentment leaks away before you even have a chance to fulfill your desires. When contentment leaves your heart, discontent remains behind to take its place. Desire breeds more desire. A person who does not have anything at all may feel very happy and contented when he gets 100 rupees, but once he gets the 100 rupees, he thinks how nice it would be if he could get 1000 rupees. If by chance he gets the 1000 rupees, he his desire to have a million rupees, then he would aspire to become a major property owner. From a property owner, he would want to become a legislator and then a minister and then the prime minister. Finally, he would want to use all his status and wealth to attain the God state, but you can never reach divinity with the help of power and wealth. As the person's desires cross all limits, he becomes discontented and his wealth gains him no inner peace at all. You must learn how to gain contentment from whatever you have, being satisfied with whatever wealth you have been given. Your responsibility is to take care of the possessions you have received through the grace of God and be happy. You must win God's love. You all praise God, but it is far more important that God praises you. You declare your love for God, but you have to find out if God has declared His love for you. You believe that God is yours, but has God told you that you are His? Suppose you send a registered letter to someone. You will gain full satisfaction only after you receive an acknowledgement from the addressee that the letter has been received and read. Declaring your love for God and declaring that God is great can be compared to sending a registered letter, but that alone will not satisfy you. You experience the deepest contentment only when you get the positive acknowledgement from God that you have His love and that He considers you great also. It is only when He says, "You are my very own, you are most dear to me," that you attain total fulfillment. Arjuna got such an assurance from the Lord after he said to Lord Krishna, "Swami, you are my all, I am yours, I surrender everything to you." Previously, Arjuna had a number of desires, but when he surrendered fully to the Lord, he renounced all his wants and desires. Then he earned the declaration from the Lord, "Dear one, you are mine." To gain this result, you have to engage yourself in spiritual practice. The hope and fruit of all spiritual practice is to get this declaration from the Lord that you are His. This becomes your greatest treasure, the consummation of your life. Even if you are highly educated, even if you occupy a very high position in life, even if you are very wealthy, whatever be your station in life, when you go abroad, you must have a passport to travel in a foreign land. A person may say, I am highly educated, I am very wealthy, I have vast and land holdings, I would like to have a passport, but just by saying that he will not get the passport. All these things may be personal attainments and accomplishments, but if you want to go to another country, there is a particular procedure that you must follow. This procedure cannot be different for educated people and for uneducated people, for wealthy ones and for poor ones. Even in such a small thing as going somewhere by bus or train or plane, no one will carry to know your position and accomplishments. As long as you have a ticket with you, no one will ask you if you are a wealthy person or an educated one and what position you are holding. They will be satisfied to know that you have a ticket and they will take you to your destination. If you do not have the ticket, you will be left behind no matter what your cre- credentials are. In the same way, if you want to gain entry into the kingdom of liberation, you need to have the grace of God that is required for entry. The grace of God is your passport, but even a passport is not enough. If you merely have a passport, then there may still be some objections and problems. You should also have a visa that gives the right to enter your place of destination. In addition to the grace of God, you must also have the merit of your spiritual efforts and yearnings. The giver may be ready to give the gift, but the receiver must also be ready to receive it. God is prepared to give, but you must have the capacity to receive. Through your surrender and spiritual efforts, you become ready to receive God's grace. Therefore, to enter into the kingdom of liberation, you must have God's love and you must also have the merit of your own spiritual efforts. When these two come together, you will be able to gain liberation. Contentment is the real wealth. The Gita taught that if you want to enter the kingdom of liberation, there are 26 noble qualities that you should acquire. But truly, it is enough if you have gained just one virtuous quality. That will be sufficient to quality you for entry. All of the virtuous qualities given in the Gita chapter on devotion, one of the most important is contentment. Only the one who has contentment can be considered great. Swami asks quite often, who is the greatest human being in this world? The answer is the one who is always satisfied. Therefore, develop this contentment in yourself. Do not get lost in the words aspiring for impermanent joys, impermanent wealth, impermanent position, and luxuries. There is no objection to your enjoying the happiness which comes your way, but never forget that the world is made up of only of the five elements. It has no eternal value. Your body also consists only of the five elements. As long as you consider this world real, you will tend to have attachments to the body and to a given place. It is best if you do not waste your time caught up with these attachments. Instead, always remember the goal. Here is a small example. There was a wealthy man who had traveled the world over. He resolved to build a palatial mansion without equal anywhere. It was to be a house of such extraordinary grandeur that it would be beyond the imagination of anyone. He resolved to construct this unique structure even if it cost him tens of millions of rupees. A number of engineers and architects were called from various countries for this purpose. Ultimately, he completed his beautiful mansion and he now had a house which satisfied people from all points of view and different cultural background. Tens of thousands of people came to look at it. These points of view and different cultural ground. Tens of thousands of people came to look at it. This wealthy man made all the arrangements for a grand inauguration of his unique place. Before the inauguration, he called a number of experts and asked them, "Do you find any defects, any faults in this building anywhere, even in the smallest details?" They could find none. It seemed to be perfect. He invited all kinds of people to the function, including many wealthy citizens and high officials. He also invited great sages to gain their blessings. Among the invited guests there were a number of truly wise men. All elaborate arrangements were made for their stay. After they were assembled, he prayed to them, "I humbly ask you to let me know if there are any defects, any shortcomings in this structure." The engineers who had constructed the buildings echoed his sentiments and also asked the assembled crowd, "Who can come forward and just point out a single flaw in this beautiful building? We feel that it is absolutely flawless and magnificent. It is totally unique and modern, perfect in every detail." At this point, a yogi who was standing in the corner stepped out and addressed the wealthy man who was hosting the fair. The yogi said, "Esteemed sir, I see two major flaws in this building." All the people assembled there were greatly surprised. The engineer and architects were shocked. Everyone was most curious to know what these defects were. The wealthy man whose house it was folded his hands in supplication and said to the great sage, "Swami, please tell me what these defects are, what you have spotted. Everyone is anxiously waiting your answer." The yogi said, "O rich man, these are faults for which you are not to blame, nor your engineers or architects or workmen. These defects are not within your reach or anyone else's to correct. One defect is that with the passage of time, this building and everything that is now standing here will fall down and be reduced to rubble. This is a defect that cannot be changed. The second failing is that the person who built this structure will also perish and be forgotten. These two cannot be changed, even though these conclusions may be delayed for a short period of time. They will both come to pass. Not realizing this truth, you think that you have accomplished something flawless and great, that your achievements will be permanent, but it is not so. These defects that I have mentioned will always prevail in the end. Such is the state of affairs for people who forget and think that they or their works or reputation will be permanent. Only when you keep your focus on the Atma will you be filled with contentment and unending joy and bliss. When you have such everlasting peace and contentment, you will be established in a mansion that can never perish. For then you are abiding in the Atma, your unchanging permanent self. It alone has lasting value. There is nothing that can be compared with that dwelling place. Unlike the mansions you find in the world, it is perfect and permanent, free from all defects. Therefore, you have to recognize the truth that in this mundane world everything is impermanent. Keep your sight and concentration on the permanent Atma. Constantly engage yourself in spiritual practice in order to achieve this inner vision and remain ever contented, undisturbed by worldly affairs. Atma is never born, Atma never dies. To dispel Arjun's confusion about his outer role and his true identity, Krishna said, "Arjuna, you are disturbed because you think you are going to kill some people. You have lost sight of the truth that underlies all beings. Know that you are the immortal self and your kinsmen, though they have been engaged in evil deeds, are in a sense the very same immortal self. Then who is going to die and who will be engaged in killing? You who are the Atma do not kill, and your kinsmen who are the same Atma will not be slain by you. Death relates to the physical body, not to the true self. Atma cannot be killed. Atma is never born, Atma never dies. It is only when you understand and practice this truth that you will be following the wisdom teachings and performing your duty unaffected by outcomes. Recognize the immortality of Atma and fight to uphold righteousness. Then you will act in harmony with the divine will, and even in the thick of battle, you will be immersed in inner peace. When you recognize the principle of the Atma, realizing its permanent nature, you will know that there will be no defect or flaw of any kind in it. Then no disturbance can come into your mind and no doubts will ever be cloud you. All this must be understood in its deeper meaning. These statements that one does not kill and that one is not going to be killed are quickly accepted at face value by most people who read the Gita, but they make no attempt to understand the deeper significance of these declarations, which are based on the principle of immortal and unchanging nature of the Atma. If you look about to see how people are practicing this teaching, you will see that they are not practicing it all at all, although they will freely repeat all the verses and even give lectures on them to others. Here is a small example of this. There was a certain hunter, a very bad man who had killed a great number of animals. His killing soon spread to include human beings. He began murdering all the people who passed through the forest and came his way in order to strip them of whatever possessions they were carrying. When he was caught and convicted, the judges decided to sentence him to death by hanging as punishment for all the horrible crimes he had committed. It was announced that the judgment would be read in court the next day. When he was led into court for sentencing, this criminal brought with him a copy of the Gita which he kept in his pocket. The judge declared that by 7 o'clock the following morning he would be hanged. But now, quite boldly, the criminal spoke up, declaring, "Sir, why are you inflicting such a drastic punishment on me?" The judge replied, "This sentence is being given because you have murdered so many innocent people." All this point, the convict took out the Gita from his pocket. At this point, the convict took out the Gita from his pocket. He showed it to the judge and said, "According to this holy scripture, sir, I am neither the killer of those people nor have they been killed." And he brazenly added, "How can you deny these statements made by God Himself?" Well, the judge was equal in cleverness to this man. Without a moment's hesitation, the judge said, "Yes, it is certainly true that you have not killed, nor have those people been killed. Similarly, as pertains to my judgment, I am not killing you, nor will you be killed. Nevertheless, the hanging will take place at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. Reduce your desires and remember the Atma. You cannot use the Gita to change the circumstances to suit your convenience. You have to practice the truths that are contained in the great statements made in the Gita. After realizing their inner significance, the Gita has not just been taught to Arjuna. This sacred teaching has been given to all people born on the earth. The Gita has been given to the entire world with Arjuna as the medium. Arjuna stands as the representative of all mankind. These teachings, which have been given to the representative of humanity, are applicable to humanity as a whole. To follow these teachings, you have to gradually reduce your desires and wants and gain an understanding of the principle of the Atma that will bring you to a permanent state of contentment. Examine your life to see if you are practicing these teachings in your day to day activities. Just by memorizing the 700 verses of the Gita, you will not be able to experience the great truths that are hidden there. These deeper truths will reveal themselves in the circumstances of your daily life. It is there in everyday situation that you will be able to experience these truths directly. You have to clearly understand the qualities that have to be practiced while discharging your duties. You have to recognize how each of these 26 will help you reach your goal and then have to apply them in your daily life. Therefore, keep your desires and your greed under control and be ever content. This will earn for you the love of God. Your profession of love for God is not enough. That you love God is not of much use unless you get His love directed towards you. You have to learn how to earn His love and grace. There is no point in shouting and saying that God is yours. You have to aspire to hear from God the declaration that you are His. That is the most important thing you must achieve in this life. From this moment on, from this moment on, develop the sacred qualities which will evoke this priceless declaration of love from the Lord and thereby sanctify your life. Patience and forbearance, the heart of spiritual practice. Of all the noble characteristics that a devotee must possess, none is more vital than forbearance. When you have forbearance, you shine with a peaceful, forgiving quality that remains undisturbed under all circumstances. When you have forbearance, then no matter how others treat you, whether they are caring and friendly or whether they are hostile or indifferent towards you, you will feel only love towards them. Embodiments of love. Forbearance is the heart of all spiritual practice. It is the one quality which all spiritual aspirants must achieve in their lifetime. For the truly wise, for the great sages and great souls, forbearance is their very splendor, their penance, their sacrifice, their righteousness. It is their wisdom, their immeasurable love. Forbearance is the essence of their non-violence, their compassion, their depth of happiness. Forbearance is the very mark of all great beings. Truly, forbearance is something. Without forbearance, it is not possible to realize the truth of the Atma, to manifest the everlasting and ever luminous divine presence that shines undiminishably within you. Realize the Atma through your direct experience. As long as you think that your body is real and your divinity is not real, you will not understand the principle of Atma. And as long as you identify yourself with your body and not with your essential truth, your real self, you will not be able to gain the direct experience of your indwelling divinity. The Atma has been spoken of in many ways, but you can comprehend it only through your direct experience. Someone may describe the exquisite sweetness of mango nectar to you in elaborate detail and with great enthusiasm, but unless you have tasted the nectar and experienced it directly, you will not be able to appreciate its unique sweetness. When the nectar is on your tongue and you delight in its taste, then you understand understand what is meant by its sweetness. Similarly, unless you seek the direct experience of the Lord, unless you engage in spiritual practices and develop the noble qualities that are dear to the Lord, you will never be able to savor the divine sweetness arising from the Atma. What is the way to immortality? It is the removal of immortality. Swami has often spoken of this. Only when you remove the immortality within you will you be able to gain immortality. When you remove the weaknesses such as jealousy, hatred, anger, pride, and all the other evils which have obscured your truth, then you will be able to enjoy the strength of the unchanging presence of divinity inside you. It is when you embody at least one or two of the 26 virtues which have been mentioned in the Gita, when you understand their deeper meaning, practice them and make them part of your daily life, then it will become possible for you to realize the immortal nature of the Atma. Of the many virtuous qualities that a devotee can develop, forbearance is at the heart of. We gain forbearance through difficult circumstances. Forbearance cannot be learned by studying books. It cannot even be acquired by the teachings of a guru. It is not something which can be purchased in the bazaar. It is only by faithfully sticking to your spiritual practice when you are under trying circumstances that you will be able to acquire forbearance. It is when you are under test in situations which are full of problems and difficulties that the cultivation of forbearance takes place. Under those trying circumstances, weaknesses which are hidden within you will show their ugly heads. They will manifest in you as anger, fear, arrogance, hatred, and many other evil that cover your essential truth. It is at such times that you must recognize these weaknesses and rise above them. Whatever action you must undertake that is appropriate to the situation, your inner state must be unaffected and rooted in unwavering peace and love. This is the practice of forbearance. If you have not developed forbearance, then you will suffer a lot of unhappiness and lack of peace in your life. Without forbearance, you may take to harmful and evil ways. Therefore, it is essential that you recognize the importance of forbearance. All the education, strength, and renown that you may have acquired will be of no use to you if you do not have forbearance. There have been a number of accomplished people who have acquired great powers by means of penance, but they were unable to enjoy the fruit of their penance because they lacked forbearance. Death of forbearance has made great scholars their prestige. Lack of forbearance is the most frequent reason for the loss of kingdoms by ruling kings. Forbearance is the shining jewel that decorates a human being. If this important quality is lost, you will suffer innumerable problems and sorrows. Therefore, develop forbearance. It is essential for your spiritual progress. Without this quality, you will come to ruin. Cultivate forbearance by the arduous practice of putting yourself to the test in very difficult circumstances. Forbearance is your vital protection. When you are equipped with forbearance, you will not be troubled by grief or difficulties, by problems or unexpected situations. There is nothing extraordinary about returning good for good, but doing good in return for bad is an extraordinary quality. What is meant by doing good at all times, no matter whether it is right or wrong action that is directed towards you. When you are established in your essential truth, when you are in touch with your reality, you cannot but give the proper response under all circumstances, and it will come from the infinite reservoir of goodness and love, which is your unchanging nature. The practice of such a virtue requires a great deal of skills and courage and a deep commitment to the essential truth of the one divinity present in all hearts. However much other people may criticize you, however much they may undermine and condemn you, you should never lose forbearance. You should remain unperturbed and continue to enjoy inner peace. When others admonish you, what will you lose? You who in your essence are immortal, how can they possibly harm you? When you have forbearance and you are established in your divine nature, how can anyone diminish you? How can anyone affect your essential truth, which is unwavering no matter the circumstances? But if because of weakness you lose forbearance and forget your truth, then you are subject to endless suffering and you lose everything. The tree, the river, and the cow. There are three important aspects of nature which are very useful to man. These are the tree, the river, and the cow. Without trees, river, and cows, humanity would not be able to function very well. Whatever violence is done to a tree, however much trouble is given to it by cutting its branches and taking some of its wood, the tree continues to give protection from rain and sun to any person who takes shelter under it, and it will try to continue to give that person joy. The trees have been doing good for people by giving fruit, flowers, and fuel, even though in return people may have been doing harm to them. In the case of rivers, however much the rivers are polluted by people in whatever way people may use and abuse them, and without showing any gratitude towards them, they will still continue to serve humanity by bringing the fresh waters from the clear mountain sides. And even as the rivers serve, all their concentration is on reaching the ocean, which is their home and goal. The waters of rivers give life to humanity. Whether you put their pristine waters to good use or bad, the rivers do not mind. They will continue to serve as they return home to their ultimate source. Then there are the cows who denied milk to their own cows in order to provide milk for humanity. They freely give such a fine and nourishing food to mankind. Whatever troubles you might give a cow, it will always give you sweet milk, not bitter milk. So cows also have been doing only good for humanity, whereas humanity may be giving all kinds of troubles to cows. Man may beat or encase them, they may starve them or abuse them, but cows retain their peaceful inner disposition and continue serve under all circumstances. These, therefore, the tree, the river, and the cows are good example of this sterling quality of forbearance. There are times when you should withhold forbearance, but sometimes the outward signs of forbearance must be tempted to provide the appropriate response to a particular situation. Although at all times you should have forbearance deeply ingrained in your heart. You should not go on displaying it under all circumstances that come up in the world. Then, practicing forbearance, you must carefully examine the conditions that apply and apply discrimination. It is well known in Indian history that a vicious invader threatened the northern kingdom and gave a lot of trouble to its good king. This merciless assailant invaded the country 17 times. Whenever he came, he caused widespread destruction in the country and took away a great deal of wealth. He put the entire populace through innumerable difficulties and losses. In spite of this, when the kingdom's ruler caught his enemy, he excused him and allowed him to return to his own country. Because of his generous heart, the good king, lacking in proper discrimination, forgave his ruthless foe. Whenever the king vanquished his foe and the defeated villain asked for pardon and protection, the good king excused him and sent him back home without inflicting any punishment. But the heartless invader did not show any gratitude at all. He was an absolutely unrepentant, wicked fellow, and he continued with his hatred towards the king and his greed to conquer the kingdom. The moment the invader was freed and back in his own country, he invaded again and again. Finally, through deceit, he succeeded in catching hold of the good king. Mercilessly, he put out the king's eye to people who are ungrateful like that, who are vengeful like snakes. You should not display forbearance. You need to use discrimination and respond appropriately. When to use forbearance and when it is inappropriate. In the great epic, the Mahabharata, which chronicles the war of righteousness between the Pandavas brothers and their wicked cousins, there is an incident depicted in which Arjuna dragged the murderer of all her children before Draupadi, the wife of the five Pandavas brothers. The Pandavas had just won the war when the horrendous deed was committed. Even though Draupadi was overcome with sorrow, she pointed out to Arjuna the circumstances under which a wicked person should be excused. Draupadi told Arjuna that it was not proper to execute a person who was overwhelmed with fear, a person who was humble and penitent and pleading for mercy, or a person who had lost his sanity and become deranged, or a person who had acted out of inconsolable grief, or women and children in general, even if they deserve such punishment. For such it is proper to show forbearance and treat them mercifully. But for the people who are repeatedly ungrateful and malicious, who are unrepentant and untrustworthy, it is not appropriate to display forbearance. You need to deal with them firmly according to the circumstances. But remember that all such actions relate only to your outer worldly life. In your heart, you must never lose your peaceful inner state of forbearance for your spiritual life. Forbearance is an essential quality necessary to reach the divine state, and you must practice it assiduously. In the case of Jesus, you can also see his highly developed quality of forbearance. There were 12 disciples living and traveling about with him. Jesus extended all love and compassion, all protection and shelter to them, but one of them, Judas, was tempted by money and became a traitor to his master. Despite Judas' infidelity, Jesus remained unperturbed and continued to extend Judas his love. There is no need for you to pray to God to see that such people are punished. As was the case with Judas, Their own acts will bring them to ruin. Whatever wicked actions a person commits, the fruits of those actions will have to be borne by him alone. No one can escape the fruits of his own actions. You may not be able to predict when and under what circumstances he will suffer the consequences, but the suffering is certain to come sometime. In both great Indian epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, there are a number of instances depicted which show how people suffered in the end when they did not practice forbearance. Consider the great suffering the five Pandavas brothers underwent, having to go to the forest and live on roots and leaves because of the hasty action of the eldest brother Dharmaraja in accepting a challenge to play a game of dice. Dharmaraja, as the king, felt it his righteous duty to respond to the challenge, and although he knew the game was rigged against him, he was in such a hurry to defend his honor that he ignored the instructions given by Krishna and the advice given by his brothers. With a determination to be true to his principles, he hastened into the gambling game and had to suffer the consequences. As a result, he and his brothers lost their kingdom and were banished to the forest for 14 years, undergoing untold deprivations and difficulties. It is only because of Dharmaraja's haste and lack of forbearance that all these consequences occurred. You even find that a great soul like Rama at times did not have sufficient patience. At the end of Ramayana, there is the incident in which Rama, after hearing the criticism and comments of one worthless washerman, immediately decided to banish Sita from the kingdom. Afterwards, he suffered great pangs of separation. But Rama was the avatar of his age, the embodiment of all the divine principles. In the case of the divinity, there will always be some deeper meaning and significance to the avatar's actions. Still, when you try to understand Rama's actions in a worldly sense, you can see that because of losing patience, Rama banished Sita and then had to suffer afterwards. Of course, when people only who do only good and live only for the welfare of others experience various troubles, they will suffer their problems graciously. In this way, they act as an example and teach the value of patience and forbearance when undergoing hardships in the world. Undue haste and delay are too extreme to be avoided. The qualities of patience and forbearance must be used with great discrimination depending on the circumstances and conditions. There are circumstances when you are justified in acting quickly. You must always think ahead and be aware of the circumstances of what you do. Under certain conditions, exercising unrestrained forbearance may lead to great troubles later on. Under most circumstances, haste creates problems. But if you are unduly slow, it may also lead to problems. It is said that undue delay can turn nectar into poison. Slowness and haste are too extreme. On the one hand, if you are hasty, your actions may be fatal. But if you delay too long, they may also be poisonous. So you must use your discrimination power and exercise patience to the degree appropriate to the circumstances. If first aid must be given immediately, or if you are attending to a person who is very sick and is likely to lose his life in a few minutes, if medicine is not given, then you must act quickly in such situations. There must be no delay. Delay would be poisonous, and you must act fast and do the proper thing. There are also circumstances when you are faced with people who are wicked and who are pursuing harmful ways, then it may be necessary for you to warn them and correct them or otherwise deal with the situation. In such a case, appearing to lose patience may be your best recourse. Frequently, all that is necessary is just to change the sound of your voice a little. It does not mean that you have lost your inner quality of forbearance. Even if you elevate your voice and appear to be angry, you can still maintain the sacredness of your heart and not lose your peace inside. To adhere to truth is the same as practicing forbearance. The follow, by following the path of truth, you will be naturally practicing forbearance. In all circumstances, always stick to the path of truth. But sometimes you may have to change the tone of your voice and the volume of your speech in a way that will deal appropriately with a difficult situation. There is a well-known story in the Mahabharata. Aswathama, the son of the teacher of both the Pandavas and their wicked cousins, and one of the three remaining warriors on the opposite side had taken a solemn and powerful oath on the last night of the war that he would use all his strength and accumulated power of penance to destroy the Pandavas' brothers before the sun rose the following morning. Krishna, of course, knew of Aswasthama's murderous resolve and also knew of Aswasthama's considerable wealth of spiritual prowess to carry it out. Therefore, Krishna, out of his deep love for the Pandavas, took steps to protect them. It was getting close to midnight, and Aswatthama had been unable to find the Pandavas. Krishna knew that Aswatthama would go to the well-knowing sage Durvasa and ask him where the Pandavas were. Now, a great sage like Durvasa would never tell a lie. He was well known for his anger, but his anger was used only to protest, to protect righteousness and to quench the fires of wickedness and evil. Even in his anger, he would stick to the truth, but oftentimes he would change the volume and sound of his voice as he was declare the truth. You may have to raise your voice a little to tell the truth. On this particular evening, Krishna went to see Durvasa. Durvasa was supremely happy to receive Krishna. Durvasa told Krishna how greatly blessed he felt to be honored by the Lord's visit. He asked Krishna, Swami, please tell me what is the purpose of your visit. Krishna replied, Durvasa, I need your help. In his heart of hearts, Durvasa was overjoyed that Krishna, who was the protector and master of all the worlds, had approached him for a help. But even for this, there is a limit. Durvasa, who was extremely intelligent and who knew all things, said to Krishna, Swami, I am prepared to give you any help you ask for, but I am not prepared to tell a lie. Krishna told Durvasa, I am the indweller in the heart of all beings. I am born again and again to protect dharma, to safeguard righteousness. How could I ever ask you to utter a lie? Dharma means right conduct, its very basis is truth. Certainly, I would never ask you to tell a lie. Durvasa replied, in that case, I am ready to do whatever you say. What is your plan? Swami, I will implement it. Krishna asked that a deep pit be dug which could hold 5 people. Krishna then told the Pandavas to get into that pit. Wooden planks were put over the pit to cover it completely. A rug was put over those planks and then Durvasa's chair was put on top of the rug. Krishna asked Durvasa to sit on the chair. He told Durvasa, Ashwasthama will come and ask you where the Pandavas are. You must tell the truth, but in telling the truth, you might just change the sound of your voice a little. As was predicted by Krishna, Ashwasthama came. Offering his salutation to the sage, he asked Durvasa, Swami, you know all things in all the three worlds. Please tell me where I can find the Pandavas. Durvasa did as he was instructed by Krishna. He told the truth. He said to Aswathama, Pandavas Pandavas, is it? Pandavas, is it? Yes, they are here. They are certainly here. They are right here, under my feet. When Durvasa, pretending to be very angry, told Aswasthama that the Pandavas were directly under him, Aswasthama got very frightened. Durvasa's anger was well known and much feared. Aswasthama thought that instead of killing the Pandavas, he himself might be killed by Durvasa's yogic power. Right then and there, suddenly overwhelmed with fear, he ran away. Durvasa had uttered the truth. In keeping with his own integrity and stature as a great sage, he followed the commands of the Lord to give protection to good people by sticking to truth. But he did change the impact a little by raising the tone of his voice. Negative qualities must be uprooted and destroyed. Okay, I end the video here. Thank you, dear. Thank you. Please subscribe my channel and comment, like, and share the video. Thank you, Sairam. Thank you. Thank you, Sairam.